Hello everyone, welcome back to the Ask a Trainer series. I'm Jess Thompson, Content Manager for Learning and Development at ATD, and I am super excited about today's guest. Cara North is joining me to talk about learning experience design. Cara is the founder and chief learning consultant at the Learning Camel and author of ATD's latest book, Learning Experience Design Essentials. Let's dive in. Hi, Cara. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Ask a Trainer today. How are you?
Phenomenal, Jess. Really excited to be here today.
And I'm so excited to have you. Today we're talking about learning experience design, and your book, Learning Experience Design Essentials, came out not too long ago. So how are you feeling?
I am completely overwhelmed by all the kind things that people have had to say about it. It's still one of those things I struggle with of, gosh, why would someone care about my perspectives and opinions on things? But a lot of the kind words have really been near and dear to my heart. So it's been very, very gratifying to see people really enjoying it and sharing their journey with me. That I think is what it's all about as learning and development professionals. We all can kind of help each other figure out the meandering world of the work that we do.
Oh, that's wonderful and so well deserved. I've started reading a little bit of it myself, and it's just a really great read. So my first question for you is, can you start by defining what learning experience design is and what prompted you to write this book?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I was very privileged to have the opportunity to formally get educated in broader instructional design. So if you look at kind of the history and where we started and kind of where we are now, I think a lot of the reasons there are, I think, some complexities about trying to define the work that we do is, instructional design started way before we had technology like the computer and internet and virtual classroom spaces and all of that. So I really felt the need to define it, or I'm going to say simplify it through this lens of learning experience design of, hey, we came from this space where it was very much about this systematic delivery of content, right? So, everybody kind of gets that same experience, so to speak, and everybody gets that same baseline of information, and either you got it or you didn't, right? And maybe there's opportunities to practice, but sometimes it's just kind of one of those trial by fire, so to speak. So really, I wanted to provide like this other kind of perspective of learning experience design that pays homage definitely to that kind of first take of the instructional piece of instructional design, but really also thinks about all these complexities in our workplaces and the technologies and kind of all of the things combined. And so that was the reason why I really wanted to tell the story, talk a little bit more about it. And then also kind of a secondary reason is I know that there's a lot of wonderful people that have been looking for guidance in this space for a long time. I know that we've been very fortunate to welcome a lot of new first-time learning and development professionals over the last few years. And as they're reading content and as they're consuming content, to be very curt, I think that a lot of the content out there really kind of romanticizes and it makes it more simple of the work that we do. And I didn't want to get it twisted. I wanted to say this is complex work. And, a lot of people reading this stuff assumes that, for example, Addie is very, sequential, when in practice, it very much not the case, right? So I wanted to provide a book that gets you on that journey, but also tells the real story of what actually doing this work is. And at the end of the day, Jess, we are in the people business. That's what makes us the best business, but that's also what makes us the most challenging business as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of people new to learning and development will really appreciate that real talk. And speaking of real talk, in your book, you talk about learning experiences should not be spray and pray interactions. Can you explain what you mean by this? And then how does LXD differ?
Sure. So when I talk about spray and pray, what I mean is this prescriptive method that often comes from stakeholders in companies of just give people content and they're trained. And I'm going to use that in loose quotations. And it's a battle, I think, no matter where you are, whether you're a mid-level professional, you're new, or heck, maybe even if you're in a leadership position, this is a constant battle against stakeholders. And it comes from the fact that everybody that is in a workplace has had some kind of educational experience in their lives, right? And so going back to traditional schooling methods of, you have a teacher talking you through things, and then you get the content and you take tests and that kind of thing. A lot of that is still translated into our workplaces for learning experiences. And I wanted to caution folks and give an alternative perspective here. Is like, is that really the best way? Because, if you are, I'll say, conditioned to prefer your content that way, then yeah, maybe. But I know a lot of people something like that wouldn't work for. So, what I really wanted to call out in this process is this thought of, not only just making the content available, but providing that contextual piece of why somebody needs to know this, how they're going to use it on the job, and giving that additional clarity around it. That way, they're able to take the content and apply it. Because ultimately, again, this isn't a new concept in itself, but we really care about performance in our workplaces. And that's really what I wanted to call out against the traditional spray and pray. I think that's also why we see a lot of compliance training fail, is because it's kind of this a la carte canned content, and people kind of roll their eyes at it like, gosh, I got to sit through this hour of this thing, and I would never do that to my colleague, or I'd never be in a position like that. But if you take that same kind of content and say, okay, as a leader, how do you handle a complaint if somebody had interpersonal conflict on the job? Or, as somebody who may hears from your coworker, how would you handle hearing this story about, again, interpersonal conflict on the job? That changes it a little bit because it puts them, the person on the other side, which I think we forget about sometimes, into the story and narrative. And when we do that, then we unlock, I think, additional layers of engagement. We think about kind of that emotional hook and having people connect with content a little bit deeper versus this kind of sage on the stage, so to speak, giving you the content. You don't just want to give people content. You want them to take it and then, weigh it out and, fill it out and then, you know, figure out how it best works for them. And so that was really the point and intention of calling out the spray and pray content that I think is so ubiquitous in a lot of organizations.
Okay. So I'm curious, how does learning experience design promote accountability and a culture of learning?
Yeah, great question. So I think kind of one of the principles, and I think I do call this out a couple times in the book, is, I've been doing this work now for 16 years, and I keep looking over my shoulder here, and I still don't have a cape. And so that tells me two things. One, I'm probably not cool enough to pull off a cape in real life. But two, it also tells me that the work and the building up of people is not one person or one department's job. Continuous learning and improvement is everyone's responsibility. Actually, your own organization, ATD, that is one of my favorite things, Employee Learning Week every December. What is the slogan? It's everyone's responsibility. But too often in traditional workplaces and kind of this traditional mindset, we feel like we have to be the hero and we feel like we have to get everything across the finish line. But truthfully, we can only do so much because at the end of the day, content and content alone will not fix a lack of accountability. And so by building kind of the content and involving enterprise partners in it and providing them with success steps, which I outline again kind of in the book in one of the examples specifically, that gives skin in the game for them. And that becomes way more powerful than just, again, sitting passively and consuming content. So for me, it's a team sport. It's about making sure that people have the tools necessary to be productive and beyond productive, execute their jobs well and safely and confidently. And that is something that us in learning and development broadly just absolutely cannot do alone. So that's been a big aha moment for me in my career. And I think a fallacy of so many learning and development professionals is just feeling like they have to do it all alone. But again, the cape still has not showed up for me. And I'm convinced more than ever it's not because of my fashion sense, but it's because truly I'm not meant to do it all alone. So.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So in your book, you talk about these capabilities. It's one of the things of the many things that I love about your book so far is these capabilities. Why is it important for practitioners to understand these capabilities before they start engaging or before they explore this LXD process?
Sure. So I think it's really critical, and one of my favorite people in learning and development, Mike Taylor, I've heard him say this a gazillion times, but one thing that he says is if you're in learning and development, it's your job to be a professional learner. And I feel like if we're asking for the time of folks in our organizations, if we're asking for the resources of different departments in our organizations, then we also need to make sure we're bringing our A game and we are keeping up with the way that, technology is evolving and, the ways that we can engage folks. So that is why I wanted to at least outline some capabilities to get people started, get people talking and thinking more about it. Because if it is only content development, I do worry, especially as AI becomes more ubiquitous, it becomes extremely transactional for us if we're only content developers. So I really wanted to challenge the perspective of it's not just about building the e-learning or it's not just about building the video, but it's really about the journey. It's about trying to solve the business problems. It's about being a good consultant and helping your organization overcome some of these issues that they're having and brainstorming and being a key partner. That's what the real magic of this work is. And I don't see in my own kind of sphere of influence, I don't see a lot of people talking at that depth of it. I think a lot of people, especially if you're finding us for the first time, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And as you're starting to maybe get your first role in this space, please try your best not to just jump into the content development pool only. It is far more critical for your longevity and your career trajectory in this work to really dive in, learn a little bit more about business processes, learn a little bit more about what makes an organization tick. What are some of those research skills that you need to kind of bring to the table to really make a compelling case for what you're asking for in the business? So that's why I wanted to call that out. I just wanted to give people, if they're, kind of new to this concept or they needed some guidance, like how could I potentially get started? And honestly, Jess, that could be a book on itself. Maybe that'll be with the second book,
Yeah, I like it. All right. Yeah, we'll chat. Yeah, and we're actually going to talk about AI a little bit later. I do have a question about that for you later. But before we get there, I wanted to talk a little bit about task analysis and needs assessment. And it's something that you actually talk about in your book as something that you really like to do. It's one of your favorite ways to get pieces of information. And so I have a question. Well, it's more of a three-part question, but I was wondering first, how can task analysis make a significant difference to your training? And then what value does it bring to learning experience design? And then lastly, I know that sometimes it can be hard to get your stakeholders to let you do this. So how do you get your stakeholders to let you do this?
For me, I think that, to really truly understand the components of the work that someone does, you have to be able to break it down into these various steps. And in these steps, you're wanting to know simple questions like, what does good look like? How do people know that they're doing it accurately? And then my favorite question to ask any subject matter expert that I work with is, how do people mess it up? They love telling those stories of like, oh, I remember
Mm.
that one time when so and so did X. And the reason I love asking that so much, that is an absolute treasure trove for your assessments. Absolute treasure trove. Because if you know that this is common mistakes that people are going to be going through on the job, you're really going to be able to have more authentic assessments and also more authentic conversations and content around what it is that they're going to be asked to do on the job. So I like to really use task analysis as a opening gate or an olive branch to help build relational equity on all the projects that I work on. Because I could sit and go through old manuals, PowerPoints, whatever the content source is, and I could make judgment calls. But guess what? I'm not the end user. And I think that that's another fallacy a lot of folks fall into as they're getting started doing this work is they assume, oh, well, I like X, so I'm going to put that into the learning experience that I'm building. No, not necessarily. You are not the end user. You kind of have to put your ego aside. So by asking the questions in a task analysis and by doing the work of helping break it down, one, you're building relational equity because you can truly say, nope, this actually came from people doing the job. Two, you can cross-reference against those amazing documents that often are not updated in your organizations, including job descriptions, maybe standard operating procedures, and then you're also kind of checking against kind of the way we've always done it to really get clarity around, is this the appropriate way, and is there a right or wrong way to execute it? And third, I mean, the way that, you can really get buy-in if this is the first time doing it is, you're just really trying to strengthen your case and come at it from a fact-finding point of view. And very rarely do I find that people don't want more information or facts about things. I don't know. I guess obviously your mileage will vary a little bit on that depending on your organization. But really, I mean, a lot of subject matter experts that I've worked with in my career are extremely passionate about the work that they do. And so, especially if they have a way to give back, explain at a deeper level, and then provide more clarity around it from a longevity standpoint, I feel like task analysis is a great way to do that.
Yeah, you share so many cool stories in this book around task analysis or needs assessment that you've conducted. There was this one story that stuck out to me where you were speaking with a nutritionist and you asked her a question. I think there was, I can't remember exactly what the issue was.
Yeah, the banana. It was the
The
magical
banana.
banana.
Yes.
Why did
Mhm.
somebody receive a banana on night shift? And
Yep, that was it.
yeah, just asking that question and them not being able to answer it, right? Because it was
Yeah.
a directive from somebody. Hey, somebody made a mistake on an evening shift. Sounds like we need to get somebody in here and do some broad nutrition training. And when I asked the question, like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about it? They couldn't because they received directive to reach out to vendors to possibly build this out. But where I was sitting, I didn't know if that banana was because maybe something wasn't marked on someone's chart. Maybe, I don't know about you, Jess, but being around the elderly, I certainly enjoy it because they're a little frisky sometimes. I could see somebody just taking a banana off a cart. You never
Hmm.
know, right?
Yep.
So there's all these things at play, but I didn't have clarity, and I quickly found out that the person that reached out to me did not have clarity that that was the right call. So even just being curious and asking, again, may seem a little counterintuitive, it may seem a little scary the first couple times you're doing doing it, but you're coming from a place of love, and you're also coming from a place that you really want to be a good steward of the resources of the organization too. It takes a lot of time and money to build out learning experiences, but it takes even more time and money for people to go through them on the job. I mean, if you think about the size of various organizations, 15, 20 minutes out of production, so to speak, that adds up pretty quickly. So, don't feel like you're doing it to be, I guess a contrarian or anything. You're really coming from a place of curiosity to try to get more information, just to try to understand it a little bit better.
So let's talk about AI. AI is everywhere right now. So I'm curious what practitioners should keep in mind so that they honor this mindset shift and they stay focused on prioritizing the learner context and don't revert back to sort of this content-driven mindset.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. In my own kind of use case of AI, I've been using a lot of AI for versionings of learning experiences, specifically about multiple languages. So I've been using a lot of kind of AI tools to do some first pass translation work, and then handing it over to the consultants who are native speakers, and then still working with the consultants, still paying the consultants, but their job just looks a little bit different. Instead of writing everything natively, they at least have a script to start with, and then they can go through from a QA perspective. So that's been really nice. But from a content perspective with AI, I really think there's a couple of, I'll say, safeguards you might want to think of. One, I think that it's still kind of nebulous as far as how data is being stored and all of that. So I'd be very careful and cautious about putting any intellectual property of the company into these systems, because we're not really sure how they work yet. So that would kind of be the first thing. Second thing is, use it as a guide. Don't use it as everything. So you still need to connect with people. You still need to be having these conversations with the folks that are doing the work that you are supporting. So AI is certainly not replacing that yet. Not saying that that might not be further down the road, but really leaning into something like a task analysis or a good needs assessment. These are things that AI can't really do yet. And then, of course, the third is really think about how you can leverage AI as a brainstorming tool for more and more ways to reach your audience in different ways. So I mentioned in the book there was something that we did where we actually had a company contest to go along with one of the learning experiences that we pushed out about quality assurance. And so if you aren't really a creative person and don't think like that, sometimes AI might help you brainstorm something like that that can really, again, be a nice little extra and help push the message a little bit further across the line.
Cara, if folks have more questions for you about learning experience design and they want to keep up with you and all the great things that you've got going on, where can folks find you?
Sure. So probably the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn URL is, linkedin.com/in/Cara North 11. And my website is thelearningcamel.com, Brian Consulting Company, or you can reach out to me directly via email at kara@thelearningcamel.com. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much for sharing all of those insights with us today, Cara, on this episode of Ask a Trainer.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's all our time for today, everyone. A huge shout out to my guest, Cara North, for joining me on today's episode. If you want to keep up with all of the great things that Cara has going on, make sure to check out the show notes below. And if you want to find out when our next Ask a Trainer video drops, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click on that bell icon to be notified when our next video drops. I'm Jess Thompson, and thanks so much for watching.